Once upon a time in the village of Umoy, there was a woman so beautiful that men forgot their own names when they saw her. Her name was Isime. Her skin was smooth like fresh palm oil, her eyes sparkled like morning dew, and her smile, oh, her smile could melt the heart of even the angriest man. Men whispered about her beauty, women envied her charm. Whenever she walked through the market, traders forgot their prices. Men dropped whatever they were holding, and even the birds in the trees seemed to pause and watch. One old woman sighed and shook her head. "This kind of beauty is dangerous," she murmured. She was beautiful. She was wise. She knew the power she had over men and how to keep them at a distance. "No touching before marriage," she always said. Every man she met, she insisted that there would be no intimacy before marriage. Men saw this as a sign of dignity. They respected her and praised her for her virtue, but she knew the truth. This was not about dignity. This was about her secret, a secret she had carried all her life. If a man ever touched her, if a man ever saw what was between her thighs, he would never be the same again. So she smiled, she laughed, she let them admire her from afar, but she never let any man get too close. And that was how she lived until EMA, a handsome a man came into her life. EMA was a good man, a man with a heart as pure as fresh palm wine. He was kind, hard-working, and he loved Isime like no man had ever loved before. From the first time he saw her at the village stream, he was lost. His heart beat fast, his legs felt weak. This one, he told himself, this is the woman I will marry. And so he chased after her. He bought her gifts, fine wrappers, sweet palm wine, and fresh bushmeat. He sang her praises and whispered sweet words. "Isime, you are the light of my world." And Isime, she smiled and laughed, but she did not let him get too close. "No touching before marriage," she reminded him, as she did all men. Emeka did not mind. "You are a good woman," he said. His heart swelling with love, he said, "I will wait for months." They courted in the village, watched by the villagers who gossiped. Finally, our Isime will marry. And then, one bright afternoon, EMA went to her father's house with his people. He knelt before her and said, "Marry me, Isime. Be the mother of my children." Isime smiled. She liked AA. He was gentle and made her laugh, but deep inside, fear gripped her heart. Still, she said, "Yes, I will marry you." The village rejoiced. Drummers played, women danced, and children ran around shouting her name. Isime, the beautiful, is getting married. They sang. The wedding was grand. Even the oldest men in the village said they had never seen such a feast. But the real night had not yet come. When the celebration ended and the last candle burned low, Isime and EMA were alone. The room was quiet, only the sound of crickets outside. EMA held her hands and whispered, "My love, don't be afraid. You are mine now." Isime's heart pounded. She knew this moment would come. Her hands trembled as she stepped back. "Emeka, maybe we should sleep first. We are tired," she said, her voice shaking. Emeka laughed. "Sleep, my wife. Don't be shy. I have waited for this night. I will love you gently." Isime swallowed hard. She knew there was no escape. Hesitant and shaking, she finally pulled off her clothes. The moment Eme set his eyes on what lay between her thighs, he let out a loud scream. Then, in the blink of an eye, he went blind. "Ah, my eyes, my eyes!" Ima's voice rang through the night. He clutched his face and staggered back. Isime froze. "What is it? What is wrong?" she cried, but Ika could not hear her. His world had turned black just like that. His eyes had gone blind. His screams woke the entire village. People ran into the house, elders, women, even the children. "What happened? What is wrong with him?" they asked, but Ima only wailed. He pointed at Isime, shaking, his mouth open in horror, but he could not see her anymore. The elders whispered among themselves. The villagers looked at Isime with suspicion, but nobody could explain what had happened. The next morning, Isime packed her things and left. She did not cry, she did not explain, she just left. Iema, behind his eyes forever dark, his future forever changed. Her secret was still safe, but fate was not done with her yet. Not long after Ieme's mysterious blindness, whispers about Isime filled the village like Hamatan dust. Some said she was cursed. Others said Ieme had fallen sick from an unknown disease. But no one knew the truth. Isime carried on with her life as if nothing had happened. Then, a few months later, Isime met another man. His name was Ed. He was not like AA. He was richer, stronger, and more powerful. His father was a great chief, and his mother came from a long line of wealthy traders. Ed himself had businesses in many towns. He had horses, farms, and enough gold to make even the king envious. He felt jealous when he first saw Isime. His heart skipped a beat. "Who is that woman?" he asked his friend at the market. "That is Isime," the friend replied. "The most beautiful woman in Umuji. But be careful, my brother. There is a mystery about her." Ed laughed. "What mystery?" "A woman this beautiful cannot be dangerous. I will marry her." And so he began to chase Isime like a hunter after a deer. He sent gifts to her house, clothes from faraway lands, beads that sparkled like the stars, and bags of rice big enough to feed a whole family for a year. But Isime, as always, smiled sweetly and said no, touching before marriage. He loved this about her, a woman of virtue, a woman who respects herself. "This is the kind of wife. I need you before long," he asked for her hand in marriage. The wedding was grander than EMA's. Drummers played until their hands ached, and dancers moved their bodies until sweat covered their skin. People came from far and wide to witness the marriage of Ed the Rich and Isime the Beautiful. Even the king sent his messengers with gifts. But when the sun went down and the guests went home, the real night began. Ed and Isime sat in their new home, a big house with high walls and fine furniture. Candles flickered in the room, casting long shadows. Clothes and whispered, "My wife, my love. This night belongs to us, don't be afraid." Iz's hands grew cold. Her heart beat like the village drum. She tried to move away, but Ed only laughed and kissed her forehead. "Are you shy? Don't worry, you are mine now." Isime took a deep breath. There was no escape. Slowly, she removed her clothes at first. Ed froze, his eyes widened, his chest rose and fell as he took in the sight before him, just as Ed's eyes fell upon her secret of what's between her thighs. He opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. He lost his voice in Instantly's face. Twisted in horror, he clutched his throat, his lips moved, but nothing came out. He tried again, but still nothing. His voice was gone. Panic filled his eyes as he turned to Isime, pointing and trying to speak, but no words came. His whole body shook as he grabbed his ears. A ringing sound, loud, sharp, endless. Then silence. He could not hear. He could not speak. Fear gripped his body like a spirit had entered him. He stumbled backward, hitting the wooden stool. He ran to the door, pushing it open and rushing into the night outside. Some of his family members were still sitting around, drinking palm wine and laughing. When they saw him, they stood up in confusion. "Ed, what is wrong?" one of his uncles asked. Ed pointed at his mouth, then at his ears. He tried to speak, but no words came. He shook his head, slapped his own ears, and waved his hands. Frantically, why is he acting like this? Someone whispered among the gathered people. The drummer stopped drumming. Even the wind seemed to pause, waiting for a moment to talk to us. What happened? I opened his mouth again. Silence. Someone shouted, "He has lost his voice." Another said, "He cannot hear us." Murmurs almost filled the air, whispers of suspicion and fear. Isime stood at the door, watching. Her heart was racing. The villagers were staring at her now. "This is not ordinary," an elder finally said. "First, EMA lost his sight. Now A has lost his voice and hearing. Something is wrong. Something is very wrong." A's mother fell to the ground, wailing, my son, who did this to you?" The people turned to Isime. Isime shook her head. "I don't know what happened. I swear I don't know, but nobody believed her that night. The family took him to many herbalists. They made sacrifices, they prayed. They begged the gods, but his voice never returned, and his hearing never came back. The next morning, Izim packed her things and left. She did not cry, she did not explain. She simply walked away. Her secret was still hidden, but the villagers were talking now. This was not a coincidence. This was a curse, and fate was not done with her yet. By now, Izim's name carried whispers wherever she went. People spoke in hushed tones when they saw her pass. 2 men, one blind, one mute, and deaf. Yet no one could prove anything. Some said it was bad luck. Some said it was the work of spirits, but no one had the courage to speak to her directly. Then came Obina. Obina was not just rich. He was the richest man in all of Umoji. His father owned lands, his mother owned markets, and Aina himself had enough money to buy anything or anyone he wanted. Women in the village dreamed of becoming his wife, and mothers prayed for him to choose their daughters. But Obina wanted only one woman, Isime. When he saw her, his heart jumped like a frog in hot water. "This is the woman I have been waiting for," he declared to his friends. "No one else compares." His friends hesitated. One of them scratched his head and said, "Obina, have you not heard? Ima went blind and cannot speak or hear." They both married Isime. Obina laughed a deep, rich laugh that shook his belly so because 2 weak men lost their senses. "Should I be afraid?" Do you think I am like them? I am Obina. I have money, I have power. Nothing can happen to me. And just like that, he went after Isime. He showered her with gifts, boxes of gold, the finest clothes from across the rivers, slaves to serve her. He built her a house before she even said yes. And when he finally asked, Isime agreed. The whole village gathered for the wedding. It was bigger than any wedding before it. Goats were slaughtered, palm wine flowed like river water. Musicians played until their fingers bled. This time it will be different, the villagers whispered. Obina is not like the others, but when the sun went down and the last drumbeat faded, the real night began. The wedding night. Obina and Isime stood inside the finest hotel in the town. The bed was covered in white sheets. The air smelled of fresh flowers and the candles flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. Obina smiled. He was ready. He held Isime's hands. My love, you are now my wife. Tonight, nothing will come between us. Isime's heart pounded. Her hands turned cold and her legs felt weak. She had seen this before. The same night, the same moment, the same fear. She tried to move away, but Obina only laughed. Don't be shy, my wife. You belong to me now.